Here's what we were all talking about today, our instant index, starting with a royal mystery solved. An old photo surfaced today of Princess Diana.
It's been over 2 decades since Princess Diana's tragic death, yet the mystery around her final days refuses to fade. Now, a never-before-seen photograph has surfaced. At first, it looked like just another rare snapshot, but when experts zoomed in, what they uncovered wasn't just surprising, it was disturbing. A revelation so chilling, it forces us to question everything we thought we knew about Diana's last moments. What exactly did they find hidden in this photo? Where had it been all these years? And could this image finally expose the truth we were never meant to see? Buckle up, because the answers are as chilling as they are unbelievable. The newly discovered pictures. Till the end of time, Princess Diana will remain a figure the world clings to. She wasn't just royalty. She was the people's princess, the one who rolled up her sleeves, stepped into hospital wards, and reached for the hands no one else dared to touch. She poured herself into charity work, into kindness, into being present for those who needed her most. And yet, for all the love she gave, her story ended in tragedy, ripped away far too soon. To this day, it feels like the world will never truly recover from losing her. But here's where things get unsettling. As much as Diana's death has been mourned, a newly discovered photograph is forcing people to question everything they thought they knew about her final days. For years, the public was fed one version of events. Now this haunting image is pulling back the curtain and exposing cracks in the story. Lies, cover-ups, half-truths. It suddenly feels like nothing about her last moments can be taken at face value. So, what exactly have we been told that isn't true? And how does this photo shift the narrative in ways no one expected? Stick around, because the answers are as unnerving as they are revelatory. But before we unravel the mysteries of the car crash photo, something else surfaced that had everyone talking this August. A time capsule. Yes, a literal time capsule Diana buried back in 1991 at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London was dug up, and what came out of it stopped people in their tracks. Inside this lead-encased wooden box, sealed away for more than 3 decades, were fragments of the early 90s frozen in time. Kylie Minogue's Rhythm of Love album, a Casio Pocket TV, a passport, a copy of the Sunday Times from the exact day the capsule was buried, and a photo of Diana herself, just to name a few. Some of the items bore water damage, but against all odds, most of them survived intact, preserved like echoes of a different world. Back then, Diana, who had become president of the hospital in 1989, worked with 2 children who won a Blue Peter competition to choose the items. What makes this even more fascinating is that the burial of this capsule wasn't some random act. It mirrored history. Nearly 120 years earlier, Alexandra of Denmark, another princess of Wales who would go on to be queen, had buried her own time capsule as part of the hospital's foundation in 1872. Alexandra's capsule was never unearthed, but Diana's was, almost prematurely, as officials prepared to build a new children's cancer center. It's almost eerie, isn't it? The parallels, the sense of legacy passed down, and then the sudden reveal decades later, like Diana speaking from the past, reminding the world she's never really gone. And as if the time capsule wasn't enough to stir emotions, Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, added another layer of nostalgia when he shared a rare throwback photo last month. It showed him and his sister during a long-ago summer at their childhood home, Park House in Sandringham. Both were by the pool, proudly showing off their swimming badges sewn onto their bathing suits. In his caption, he painted the picture of their childhood days, mentioning Mrs. Lansdowne, the strict yet skilled swimming instructor who tested them relentlessly each summer. For a moment, fans got to see Diana not as the global icon, not as the tragic royal, but simply as a sister, a girl grinning beside her brother, caught in an ordinary slice of childhood. But while these tender memories and artifacts remind us of who Diana was in life, it's the newly unearthed photo tied to her death that is shaking the foundations of everything we thought we knew. And that's where things turn chilling. Because to understand the weight of that photo, we have to go back to the night that changed history forever. The infamous car crash and how it changed everything. It was 9 p.m. on March 3rd, 1994, and two paparazzi photographers, Mark Saunders and Glenn Harvey, were slouched over cups of coffee in Kensington, West London. They had spent the day chasing the most famous woman in the world, Princess Diana, but had nothing to show for it. Then Harvey's phone buzzed, and the game changed. A contact reported that Diana had just been spotted driving into Chelsea Harbour with an unknown man. The photographers wasted no time. They raced across London, Saunders making his way past a security guard with a story about picking up a girlfriend. Once inside, they found Diana's Audi, but the princess herself was nowhere in sight. Moments later, a man appeared, sliding behind the wheel of her car and steering it into an underground garage. Harvey shouted to Saunders to move fast. Within seconds, they were back in pursuit. The chase was reckless. Diana's car ran red lights, darted down the wrong side of a traffic island, and pushed ahead of oncoming trucks, finally swerving toward the entrance of Kensington Palace. Harvey jumped from his own car, camera ready, diving across the bonnet as he snapped frame after frame of Diana behind the wheel. He prayed the images would be sharp. They were. That night, a photo of Diana driving millionaire art dealer Oliver Hoare into Kensington Palace was sold to News of the World. It made headlines across Britain, a jackpot for the paparazzi, and yet another invasion of Diana's fragile privacy. This kind of intrusion wasn't rare. For Diana, it was routine. But 3 years later, the game turned deadly. In Paris, trapped in another chase, the speeding car carrying Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed slammed into a pillar. Neither survived. At her funeral in September 1997, her brother Charles Spencer spoke with heartbreak. He called Diana the most hunted person of the modern age and promised she would have wanted nothing more than for her beloved boys, William and Harry, to be spared the same torment. His words were a warning and an accusation. Though he never said it outright, everyone knew who he was pointing at, the paparazzi and the ruthless tabloid machine that funded their pursuit. Because the truth was brutal. Behind every flashing camera was a market eager to pay. Fleet Street's tabloid culture thrived on scandal and intrusion, feeding readers stories of royals and celebrities dressed up with a mix of moral outrage and prying curiosity. From Rupert Murdoch's son to rivals like the Daily Mirror and the Daily Mail, the formula was the same. Give the public a fix of gossip, sex, and secrets, and they'd come back hungry for more. Diana's life, and ultimately her death, became their most profitable story. This obsession didn't happen overnight. The word paparazzi itself, first explained to American readers by Time in 1961, was compared to streetwalkers, always clinging to the edge of society, chasing anyone who promised a payday. No one is safe from them, the article warned, not even royalty. The prophecy was chillingly accurate. By the late 60s, Rupert Murdoch had bought the failing Sun and changed it entirely. He knew he couldn't compete with traditional newspapers on politics or serious news, so he steered the paper towards spectacle. His vision was clear. If television was showing people actors and singers on stage, newspapers would show them what those same stars were doing off it. Love lives, scandals, affairs. It all became fair game. Other papers followed suit, and soon, the once dull News of the World reinvented itself as a tabloid monster in 1984, serving up salacious headlines to millions of readers. By the mid-1980s, Diana was no longer just a princess. She was the world's obsession. Every tilt of her head, every flicker of her smile, and every gown she wore was captured, sold, and devoured. She wasn't just photographed, she was consumed. The tabloids crowned her the people's princess, but behind the glossy covers, the truth was far darker. To the press, Diana wasn't a person at all. She was profit. Every picture had a price tag. Every sighting meant sales. And the chase for her never stopped. After her wedding to Prince Charles, watched by an estimated 750 million people, the feeding frenzy only escalated. Paparazzi weren't just lurking, they were hunting. At the height of her fame, grainy shots of Diana fetched up to £500,000, making her the most photographed woman on Earth. Within tabloid offices, she wasn't Diana, Princess of Wales. She was nicknamed the Princess of Sales. One photographer, Jason Fraser, pocketed over £1 million from selling photos of Diana and Dodi Fayed. Editors bragged about how she could outsell anyone on their covers. She was probably the most photogenic person I can ever recall, admitted Ian Down, a former Daily Mirror picture editor. And that was the problem. Editors simply couldn't get enough of her. But the price of that obsession was unbearable. Diana herself fought back only once in court, suing Mirror Group newspapers in 1993 for secretly photographing her in a gym. The case settled quietly, and she avoided testifying, but it sent a rare message that she was reaching her breaking point. Yet, even with the lawsuit, the harassment never eased. By the year before her death, Diana was openly confronting the paparazzi. At times, she screamed at them through tears, "You make my life hell!" But her tormentors mocked her pain. In their world, her outbursts weren't cries for help, they were loon attacks. That's what some of the most relentless hunters called her tearful confrontations. If she shouted, if she cried, if she simply stood still with her head bowed and eyes brimming with tears, they would log it like a grotesque game, comparing who had been looned the worst. To them, she wasn't a mother or a human being. She was a trophy. And then, Paris, August 1997. The night when the game finally turned fatal. The inquest into her death ruled she was unlawfully killed by both her chauffeur's reckless driving and the paparazzi chasing her through the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Overnight, the public turned. For once, the finger wasn't pointed at Diana, it was pointed at the press. Polls revealed the fury. 43% of Britons blame photographers for her death, while 33% blamed the driver. Millions wept openly in the streets, an image so un-British that it marked the death not just of a princess, but of the country's fabled stiff upper lip. As journalist James Rogers later said, "If anyone asked me when Britain's stiff upper lip ended, I would have said then." Tabloids suddenly found themselves despised. Sales at The Sun and the Mirror plummeted to their lowest since 1962. Editors scrambled. Just 8 days after Diana's death, the Daily Mail promised never to publish paparazzi photos again. A vow that, of course, didn't last. The same papers that hounded her rushed to rewrite history, presenting themselves as her admirers, her protectors. Hypocrisy dripped from every column inch. But the anger on the streets was real. Paparazzi photographers became pariahs overnight. For months after Diana's death, I wouldn't admit I worked for a magazine that bought paparazzi shots, said Mark Frith, then editor of Smash Hits and Heat. We were the lowest of the low. Even official royal photographers, who had nothing to do with the chase, faced abuse from grieving crowds. The rage was indiscriminate. To the public, all cameras were guilty. Something had to change. And it did. Diana's death forced Britain to confront its broken relationship with privacy. For centuries, privacy laws were almost non-existent in the UK. Your confessions to a priest or your doctor might be protected, but if you were a celebrity, you were fair game. That changed in 1997. The Protection from Harassment Act, which had come into force just months before her death, suddenly became the weapon celebrities could use to fight back against paparazzi. For the first time, the law recognized the obvious. Being chased down by men with cameras wasn't journalism. It was harassment. The Press Complaints Commission toughened its code in 1998, introducing rules that banned the use of long lenses to spy on people in private places. More importantly, it introduced a clause to protect children, directly because of Diana's sons. From then on, William and Harry were off limits at school. No long lenses, no secret shots, no exceptions, and it worked. Through their teenage years, very few unofficial pictures of the boys exist. The ones that do, like William cooking paella at Eton or Harry with his housemaster's dogs, were staged and carefully approved. For once, the boys were shielded from the chaos that had destroyed their mother, but the truce didn't last. Once William and Harry reached adulthood, the media storm returned with a vengeance. By 2003, when William began dating Kate Middleton, the chase was back on. Paparazzi hid in bushes, stalked them on holiday, and sold grainy, invasive photos to the highest bidder. And Harry, wild, young, and reckless, was hounded the hardest. In 2005, when he wore a Nazi costume to a party, The Sun plastered Harry the Nazi across its front page. In 2012, when naked photos of him in Las Vegas surfaced on TMZ, the scandal went global. The palace could only issue embarrassed apologies. The cycle was repeating itself, and the royals knew it. By 2009, William and Harry's aides turned to aggressive legal action, threatening lawsuits against agencies that crossed the line. Privacy notices were issued to editors every Christmas. Photographers who pushed too far were forced to pay damages or donate to charity. The palace made one thing clear: Diana's fate would not be repeated with her sons. Yet the press never really backed off. If anything, they evolved. They went digital. Websites like Mail Online carried the torch of tabloid culture into a new era. The hounding didn't stop. It simply changed form. And when Meghan Markle entered the scene, the world saw just how brutal and how relentless that system could still be. But the way Diana's sons were treated only made one truth shine brighter: their mother's shadow had never left. Everything the media did to William and Harry was a reflection of what had been done to her first. To understand why the cycle never ended, you have to go back to the woman who redefined what it meant to be royal and why the world couldn't let her go. How Diana became the people's princess. Diana's vision as Princess of Wales was never about crowns, palaces, or power. Her eyes were locked on something far greater, using her platform to stand beside people who were struggling. She wasn't the type to chase status or bow to royal tradition just for the sake of it. In fact, the idea of becoming queen barely crossed her lips. She only mentioned it once, and even then, her words revealed she had little desire for the throne. During a now famous TV interview in 1995, Diana admitted that she doubted she would ever be queen because of how differently she chose to live out her role. She explained that the establishment she had married into had already written her off as a non-starter, since she did things in ways that weren't exactly conventional. But rather than lamenting it, she brushed it aside with honesty. What she wanted was not to govern, but to connect. She expressed that her real wish was to be a queen of people's hearts, and she confessed that she simply did not see herself becoming queen of the country. In her own words, she explained that she led from the heart, not the head, and that was the truth. Throughout her years as a royal, and even after her marriage to Charles ended, Diana poured herself into causes that mattered. She didn't just sign checks and smile for photographs. She rolled up her sleeves and stood beside those in pain. She worked with organizations battling domestic violence and mental health struggles. And instead of keeping her distance, she went right into the room with those affected. One of her most unforgettable moments came in 1987 when she reached out her hand to an AIDS patient. At the time, ignorance and fear fueled the belief that HIV could spread through touch. Diana crushed that myth in a single gesture. She shook his hand without gloves, showing the world that compassion was stronger than stigma. Even after her divorce was finalized in 1996, Diana's pace never slowed. She kept championing children's causes, throwing herself into arts programs and showing up at shelters. She made sure William and Harry grew up seeing life outside the golden gates of royalty. She would take them to hospitals and homeless shelters, giving them a real glimpse into lives far removed from royal privilege. Her empathy, her relentless determination, and her humility built an unshakable bond with people everywhere. The world came to know her as the People's Princess. While the title would echo across generations, it was Tony Blair, the then Prime Minister, who first used the phrase in a moving tribute after her death on August 31st, 1997. Blair admitted that he felt like everyone else in Britain, utterly devastated by her loss. He called Diana a wonderful, warm human being whose life had been marred by tragedy, yet who still managed to bring joy and comfort to countless others around the globe. He declared that she was the people's princess, and that she would remain that way forever, in hearts and in memories. That bond she built with people carried into the lives of her sons. In the documentary, Diana, Our Mother, William reflected on her influence. describing how she was informal, full of laughter, and determined to keep things light-hearted. But he remembered that she also wanted her children to know there was life beyond the palace walls. From the very beginning, she wanted them to understand the world as it truly was. Harry recalled her telling him that he could be as mischievous as he wanted, as long as he didn't get caught. For her, normalcy mattered. If sneaking them out for burgers, taking them to the cinema, or driving down country roads with the roof down and Enya blasting on the stereo was what it took, then she was willing to do it. That sense of grounding shaped both brothers. Today, they use the Royal Foundation as their main vehicle for charitable work, taking on numerous causes in her spirit. Together, they launched the Heads Together campaign, aiming to shift how the world speaks about mental health. In one of their most open moments, they admitted that when they were younger, they barely spoke about how her death had scarred them. In her final months, Diana's compassion was still pulling her into dangerous, uncharted territory. She set her sights on landmines, a crisis most people chose to ignore. She traveled to Bosnia and to African nations torn apart by war. And just months before her death, she famously walked through a minefield in Angola. The image of her in a protective vest, walking carefully over cleared ground, was more than symbolic. It was a call to action. Within 3 months of her visit, the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Treaty was signed in Ottawa, with 122 countries backing the move to outlaw the weapon. That promise she made to the victims of landmines did not die with her. Years later, Harry stepped forward to continue the fight. As patron of the Halo Trust, he urged world leaders to fulfill the dream of a mine-free world by 2025. Even decades later, Diana's presence still feels alive. For the 20th anniversary of her death, William and Harry announced plans to erect a statue of her at Kensington Palace. They shared that the time was right to honor her positive impact in Britain and around the world. They believed the statue would give visitors a chance to pause and reflect on her life, her love, and her enduring legacy. Diana never wanted to be queen of a country. What she became instead was something far more powerful, the queen of people's hearts. And in the end, that crown never slipped. Do you think Diana will forever be the people's princess? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.